Let's begin the Texas Subregional with what should be a fantastic showing. It's Rice, a team that everyone's been talking about over the last month, taking on North Carolina A&T, and I'm joined by broadcaster down there in Texas, Matt Pedersen. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing great to know.
Yeah, good to be on. Good to be talking volleyball. And so I mentioned this to you right before we recorded. Rice is that team that a lot of these casual volleyball fans, myself included, I'm hearing about them, but I don't know too much about them. So this is a perfect example of why I wanted to get some people talking about teams like Rice, like maybe Texas State, like Western Kentucky, teams that could possibly make some noise here in this tournament. You see Rice's last two games of the season against Baylor and Texas. They lost in 5 to Baylor. They beat Texas in 5. What really jumps out to you when you watch Rice play?
Well, the two things that stand out most, I would say, is Nicole Lennon and Anita Adekinlay. Lennon's the outside hitter. She plays 6 rotations. Adekinlay is a middle blocker. She hit over 500 in the win against Texas. But Nicole Lennon, for me, is one of the best outside hitters in the country. I've seen Yassiana Presley with Baylor in person. I've seen Western Kentucky's best hitters in person. I saw Texas State a few weeks ago playing Houston. And I put Nicole Lennon up there with anybody I've seen in person. She's an outstanding player, has really always had the athleticism, but Coach Jenny Volpe told me that she's really refined her game and become great defensively, great blocking, great swinging. They have the freshman or the setter of the year in Carly Graham, who has come a long way and been outstanding freshman setter. 2019, she's there. So they have a really complete team and a really good coach in Jenny Volpe, but I think it starts at the nets with and Lennon.
Yeah, she's one of those players that jumps out of the gym. And when you look at the stats, she's always dominating. Rice will take on first-time NCAA team North Carolina A&T before possibly playing a 13 seed and in my opinion, a winnable 13 seed in Penn State. It'll be the first time, I think, for Rice and for a lot of teams to avoid having to play that Texas massacre, you might want to call it, right? Texas and Florida are two states that really get the short end of the stick with the scheduling for NCAA tournaments, usually because of locations. Last season, Rice lost to Texas A&M. This will be their 3rd straight year making it to the NCAA tournament. But I need to ask you, if there is a weakness for Rice, because you look through their schedule and they do have losses to SMU twice, and you go down that schedule, and then after that, they really clamp down. What is one flaw, right? What did Western Kentucky take advantage of in that championship match that could possibly be the chink in the armor for Rice?
I don't know if there's really a flaw. I think Western Kentucky is a really good team. I saw them in person at the Conference USA tournament 2 years ago. It was a 5-set match. Western Kentucky won. They're really well coached. They're just a really, really good team. If you look at Rice's schedule, they're 13-2 since Adekinlay returned to the lineup. She missed some of those matches, including the SMU games early this year, but they're really tested. Western Kentucky is a legitimate top 15 team year in, year out.
Yep.
And them and Rice are very, very even. Rice played Houston twice early in the season without Adekinlay. They ended the season with Baylor. They had Baylor 9-9 in the 5th. Baylor won the 5th set, and then they bounced back and they beat Texas in 5. It's the second time in 2 full seasons they've beaten Texas, once at home, once away. So I don't know if there's a weakness. I just think on any given night, how the teams defend, how teams do with the net, serve, receive, all those sort of things you hear from coaches on a game in, game out basis. But I think Rice has a really good chance to go deep in this tournament. They beat Oklahoma in 2019 in their first game, and they were in that very difficult regional. But I think this team is tested. Lennon's ready to go. They're tested. They've played a really tough schedule. And I don't know if there's a specific weakness you would point to, but I would give a ton of credit to Western Kentucky Rice Conference USA tournament 2 years in a row. Rice, one of the best teams in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that may be a challenge against Penn State, we'll see if they can, keep up with the size of someone like a Caitlin Horde or a Johnny Parker on the outside. And I think Rice has the size, right? 3 starters over 6'1". You've got the Lennon with 6'2", Kostalecki at 6'4". So size could be something that Rice has that advantage over at least North Carolina A&T. So we'll figure it out in a day-by-day situation there to see if Rice takes on Penn State. But Matt, is there anything else about Rice that we didn't mention that you want to, chime in on?
No, I think we covered it. I think it's just a very good team, a very likable team. I think one of the benefits with the COVID pandemic was that some of these Texas teams had to play one another. So you had Baylor and Texas and Rice and Houston, Texas A&M, of course, playing quite a bit. And this team feels tested. I felt like 2019 was sort of unfinished business for them. And then they'll be motivated after losing to Western Kentucky in the Conference USA Championship. But after beating Texas for the second consecutive time, in the second consecutive full season, they'll be as confident as anyone in Omaha next week.
So I think the one thing Rice fans are going to have to do is just wait all day for that 10:30 p.m. Eastern time start. Us us East Coasters are going to have a lot of coffee to keep up with those late madness games. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
He's a broadcaster down in the Houston area, Matt Pedersen, and we're going to move on and talk NCAA. Now to the other side of that Rice NCAA matchup. We're going to break down North Carolina A&T State now. I'm joined by Brian Holloway, Associate Athletics Director for Communications at North Carolina A&T State. Brian, how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. How you doing?
Long day. Always great to talk about volleyball all day long. We've been cutting it up, and I'm not gonna mess around here. It's going to be a tough matchup. This is something that North Carolina A&T, I am sure all season long, your players have been doubted. Your coaches have had that chip on their shoulder. They're finally in the tournament for the first time in program history. What's the atmosphere been like around the team?
They're super excited. This is not only a historic time for us, being the first time in being an NCAA tournament, but this is also our final year in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, a conference that we helped to start 50 years ago. And so to be able to go out as champions in a conference that we've been a part of for so long is just special for us. And so it's a special time for our seniors. This was their goal coming into the season after COVID canceled the fall season. They felt like they had the team to win it last year, and we fell short to Morgan State in the semifinals. We lost in the finals in 2018 to a very tough Howard team. And so for the seniors, this is a moment that they've been waiting for. They felt like, they finally gotten over the hump. And so here they are, and they're just super excited about being a part of the NCAA tournament.
There are so many teams, Brian, that had to deal with pauses and stoppages. But I think the hardest ones are a team like the Aggies that had the beginning of their season postponed. An 11-1 campaign, 8-1 of the conference. And as I mentioned, first 3 matches of the year, all postponed. You host East Carolina, you get to play Norfolk State. So you have a couple ones to start it off and then off and running, right? Sweep, 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 sweep. East Carolina provides a nice 5-setter that probably got the team ready for what was a fantastic and high tempo, high intensity tournament.
It certainly was. I mean, I don't know, if it's on YouTube and people get a chance to go back and watch the Delaware State semifinal, it's one of the better volleyball matches you'll see. I mean, it was just fantastic. 3 hours, 124 total points in the contest. I mean, it was a 36-34 third set. I mean, it was just bananas. I mean, if you got heart problems, I wouldn't suggest watching it.
Yeah, let me help everyone out here. North Carolina A&T takes the first set 28-26. They bounce back, have a nice second set, 25-22. And then you've got the marathon third, 36-34. Another tight fourth set, but Delaware State, they force the fifth. And in that fifth set, Delaware State jumps out to a 5-0 lead, right? So the Aggies could easily just roll in their bags, call it a day, but they fight back, pull within 4 at 7-3, and then go on a 7-0 run to take an 8-7 lead. Goes back and forth a few times. Delaware State takes an 11-10 lead, a 12-11 lead, but then separating themselves nicely. Hall gets a big kill. And then you're going to have to help me out here. How impressive is the block? Because it looked like the blocks in these matches were game changers, right? It felt like they were, here and there. Maybe not the best blocking team in the nation, but definitely blocks when they matter the most, Brian.
They block when it matters the most, and we've got an outstanding player by the name of Edie Brewer who can do it all. She can block, she can hit, she can set. I mean, she's 2-time MEAC Player of the Year. She made the anniversary team for the MEAC 50-year anniversary team. So she can do it all. We have another young lady, Fatima Shabazz, who's an outstanding hitter. Height-wise, she doesn't probably have the height a lot of the other ones, other hitters that you'll see in the tournament, but she can get off the floor. I mean, she's very athletic. And then we have another young lady who's very athletic by the name of Shaylin Hall, who's an outstanding blocker as well. And we have what I always call our secret weapon, a young lady by the name of Addie Warfield, who's our backup setter, but she allows Edie to move around the court and be as dynamic as she is. And so, certainly we are poised, and we felt like all year we had the best talent in the MEAC. It was just a matter of putting it together and going out and getting it. And we lost the first set to Coppin State as well in the final. I just think these young ladies really just had a hunger and a thirst. They really wanted to get this championship, and they did an outstanding job.
That's important to note, too, because you might drop the first set against a talented Rice team. You have to sit around all day in your first ever NCAA tournament. And of course, they give you a 10:30 p.m. start time. Lord help whoever is their job is to make sure that they stay busy all day, right? But you mentioned they're not the tallest team, but most of the players are over 6 foot, right? 6 foot, 6'1". So it's not like your typical mid-major, low major that's got 5'8", 5'9", 5'10" players. Last question here for you, Brian. Walk me through the talent that is Shabazz. She's got more than double the amount of kills as anyone else on the team, hitting 360. Those are two things that just don't compute in the average volleyball mind.
Like I said, she's super athletic. When you see her on the court, she moves around, and she's very quick off the floor, and I think her athletic ability makes her, the player that she is. And then she can hit angles, she can direct her shots really well. And so, she has improved multiply over the years. And just to see where she is now, considering where she began, is just outstanding. And, really and truly, we have about 3 or 4 hitters that we can set the ball to, and they can go and get it. Courtney Pitt is another one of those outstanding players. We have another young lady, Molly Rupertova, excuse me, who comes off the bench, who can also knock it down. She had a great MEAC championship final as well. And so we really been blessed. And I want to say this before we go. I want to give Hal Clifton just all the credit in the world, our head coach. When he got to North Carolina A&T in 2011, he had 5 players. You need 6 to play, So, the outstanding job that he's done and his staff has done to turn this program around and to put it in the position that it is, going into the Big South, he deserves a big applause for that.
Yep. So I was going to mention it, moving from the MEAC to the Big South. Looking forward to seeing how these Aggies can make their maiden voyage. It'll be a 10:30 p.m. Eastern time start for all you fans out there. Drink some coffee, take a nap, maybe some black tea, stay awake for this match. It should be a fun one. Rice, a high-tempo team. North Carolina A&T, scrappy, making sure that they can keep the ball up and make those timely blocks. Brian, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, guys, and I appreciate it. Aggie Pride.
There you go. He's Brian Holloway, the Associate Athletic Director for Communications at NCAA. We're going to head down and break down Sanford, Wright State. On to the bottom half of this sub-regional. It's Sanford against Wright State, a matchup of a pair of automatic qualifiers, and I'm joined by the Director of Broadcasting at Sanford, John McAfoos. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I appreciate you having me.
It's going to be a fun one. I definitely have this one tabbed as one of the first-round matches to keep an eye on. Sanford, a team that has been to the NCAA tournament and a lot recently. Head coach Kaylor Chan has taken them to the tournament 6 times, 3 in a row, but looking for their first NCAA tournament win, John. And what was the season like? Every team had a different story here in this COVID abbreviated season.
Yeah, it's been an up and down year. I think really they got off to such a strong start, and we didn't play any non-conference action at all. So we jumped straight into SoCon play in January. There were a few teams in the league that played some non-conference matches back in the fall. We were not one of them. So we started right into SoCon play in January and started out strong. And then towards the end of the season, some tight 5-setters, took a couple losses down the stretch. And really we had to win our last regular season match in order to host the SoCon tournament, which we did. And that went to 5 sets. So hosting the tournament came down to the wire. And then we had a 5-setter in the semi against Wofford. Wofford had a match point at one point. Sanford battled back, and then we beat Mercer in straight sets in the championship. So it's been a wild season, but they've been pretty consistent for the most part. And I think, the selection show this year, it was a lot of fun with the new format to see a team like Wright State pop up, because we're so used to seeing Power 5 schools. It was Louisville last year. It was USC the year before that. Back when Keeler started, it was Kansas. So it's not very often that you see, another smaller school pop up. So I'm sure Wright State's saying the same thing about Sanford, but it is a matchup I think that the team's really looking forward to.
Wright State is a team that, I've seen a little bit. They played Purdue in the NCAA tournament last season, a lot of size and a very agile back row. How would you compare the Sanford team? What is, one of their strengths and maybe a few of their weaknesses?
Well, we definitely run the offense through the pins. I mean, we feed the outsides a lot, and it really all starts with Lauren Deaton. She's the SoCon Player of the Year. She was the Freshman of the Year 2 years ago. Now she's the Player of the Year as a junior, and we really feed the outsides a lot. And so you're going to see Deaton be set pretty consistently. Whenever there's a question, it's probably going to go to Deaton. So I think, she's definitely where it starts. I think a lot of players have stepped up on the right side. Last year we had Kelsey Hobbs, who was the SoCon Player of the Year. She went over, she's now playing pro overseas. So they have Sinclair Green, who really didn't play before this year, but she's a senior on the team, and she stepped up on the right side, especially in the SoCon tournament. She was on the all tournament team. So she stepped up into a bigger role. And then they have a couple of younger players that have also have kind of stepped up into bigger roles. Mcwhorter, 2 years ago, was the Player of the Year in the high school Player of the Year in Alabama. She blew out her Achilles last year and didn't get to play. So she started this year as a redshirt freshman. And she's really come on late. So she's been a big impact as well. So it's really, the offense does run through the pins. The middles are good. Sierra Razor is an impact player, and so is Bree Holmes. But the offense typically, we don't really set the middles a lot. We usually just feed the pins.
5 setters in their final 7 matches, 31 kills for Deaton in the 2 tournament matches. It's I think it's suffice to say that this team is built to go the distance. What would be, a possible game flow that we would want to see if you're a Sanford fan, right? Like what is one thing that the team really excels in if it comes down, serving, the defense, that front row attack?
I think they play well in the big moments. I think when it comes down to the wire, they find a way to get it done in those tense matches. And I think, like I said, at the beginning of the season, they were kind of rolling and they weren't playing a lot of 5 setters early on. But as you just mentioned, all of a sudden that changed towards the end. A lot of that had to do with Corinne Meglick, the starting setter, went down with an injury. So Kayla Keyshock, who was on the right side, moved over to the setter position. So that was a change over the last couple of weeks. And then they started to find a group with her. But I think it's just really one of the strengths is this team seems to find a way to win in these tight matches. They knew in the regular season finale, they had to win in order to host the tournament. That went the distance, 5 sets. It was, back and forth, and they ended up pulling it out. And again, the Wofford game here at the semifinal of the SoCon tournament, back and forth. Wofford took it to Sanford in that 4th set. And then the 5th was back and forth. Wofford had a match point. Sanford battled back. So I think it's just an ability. They've been there before, and they feel like I think they're a confident group when it comes down to the wire. They stay pretty calm and cool and collected with the match on the line.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's always interesting to see a right side hitter transition to setter. We've seen it in the past, so it's not unrealistic to expect that it might provide a little bit of success. 7 p.m. Eastern time in this first round matchup between Sanford and Wright State for the right to play Texas. He's John McAfoos, the director of broadcasting at Sanford. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Anytime.
We're going to head out to Dayton, talk to Justin Kinner, the voice of Wright State, next. And last but not least, here in this Texas Subregional, it's the Raiders of Wright State. I'm joined now by the voice of Wright State volleyball, Justin Kinner, out in Dayton. Justin, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having us. And I'm so glad that, with the volleyball season that was moved to spring, I'm happy that we are even doing a preview show for the tournament. These women deserve it. They've worked so hard, not just Wright State, but everyone involved. And I'm definitely happy to be with you today.
No, I couldn't agree more. And that's why we're here. I felt like there wasn't enough content leading up to the tournament. So we've had little droppings, and this is going to be the second to last episode. So if everything goes accordingly, there's only a few days left until the tournament, and then we've got one more episode to post, and that will be the Nebraska and Baylor subregion. This one's going to wrap up the Penn State and Texas subregion here. Wright State is going to take on Sanford. It's the second season in a row for Coach Allie Matters. She made her first and the team's first NCAA tournament as an at-large last year. But Justin, they were finally able to get over that Horizon League hump. They dominated the conference this season. They finally can, crown themselves the champions of the Horizon League and probably say that they, could have a run with anyone in terms of being an at-large bid once again, should this have been a 64 team, field.
And that was the expectation coming in. Last year, I remember when Wright State lost in the conference tournament. I mean, they were enjoying their first great regular season in a long time. And then they got upset in the conference tournament. It was heartbreaking because you're like, man, that's how your season ends. You worked this hard. You had that great of a regular season and you get upset in your conference tournament. But it actually worked out pretty good because it's so tough to get at-large bids in any sport. And the Wright State Raiders volleyball team, they were able to bring the athletics, Wright State Athletics, their very first at-large bid ever. And it worked out for the Horizon League as well because they got two teams. They became a two-bid league at that point, which was pretty special for them as well. But Allie Matters, I tell you what, when you talk about sports in general, about the importance of bringing in a coach, you always get the coaches speak of, culture this, culture that. That matters, and no pun intended, right? My first time seeing just how important a coach truly is watching just the job that she did coming in here and changing the culture and changing the expectation. Wright State volleyball, with all due respect to the school, it's not known as one of the premier athletics programs that they have, and for them to all of a sudden go from just being, okay and good to one of the top teams in the league to the top team in the league. They've accomplished so many first, their first, NCAA, tournament bid, at-large bid, last year. And then this year winning their very first Horizon League championship and getting back to the NCAA tournament for the second straight season. I mean, it starts at the top. It starts with their great athletic director and Bob Grant and the hiring of Allie Matters. But, man, she has done such a fantastic job.
So taking a look at this team, it's one of those rare situations where, and I want to say it now, I think UIC is a tournament team, and in a normal season, I think Horizon League is probably a two-bid league for the second straight season. So it's not something to say, they only, had to take them to 5 sets in that championship. But Wright State dominated the Horizon League this year. It would be an undefeated season for Wright State. For a lot of people might not realize it was a last-second addition of a talented NCAA tournament team in Dayton. A 5-set match that was all of the rave. It was worth the hype. Dayton led 12-10. Wright State went on a 3-0 run to lead 13-12 in the 5th, and then Dayton finished it on a 3-0 run. Jamie Pedersen with the match-winning kill there. And I'm sure it still stings Allie Matters to think about that. But when you look at this team, are there any weaknesses? I've been able to call a few Wright State matches over the last 2 years, and from the right side, from the left side, the back row defense, you've got one of the best setters in the nation in Lainey Stevenson and one of the best liberos in the nation in Jenna Story.
No, and you hit it on the head. I mean, they're so well balanced, and not just from a roster standpoint as well. But yeah, you talked about Jenna Story, second in the nation in digs per set. I mean, Nisa Baker, another day. I mean, she's one of those that you have to have your good contributors in left side, right side. Yes, but Nisa Baker, just the power player that she is, 12th in the nation in blocks per set. And she played such a pivotal role in the Raiders' win over UIC this past weekend. And they kind of go as she goes. Like, they have so many players they can count on. They're so deep. There are games where you don't call a couple star players. Celia Powers can have an off game, but Nisa Baker's going to be right there to pick it up. If you're not calling Jenna Story's name a lot with what she brings to the table, there's going to be another player coming right in. They're so deep and at all positions and in all classes. They're set up for long-term success, not just riding the coattails of a really impressive class. That's how quick of a job and how good of a job Allie Matters has done in turning this around. It's just the roster management. It's the how much they love playing together, and again, just the star power on top of it. They are the real deal, not just for competing within their own conference, but for taking a team to the NCAA tournament and being a very competitive team that can make some noise. They proved that against a very good Dayton team earlier in the year. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, they came on the short end of the stick there. But what that loss should have showed them was that, hey, we were right there. We could have easily have won that match, just as easily as we lost it, we could have won it. And that's going to be that momentum that they take after an undefeated conference season, winning their conference tournament. Taking that momentum into the tournament is huge. If they can get past their first round opponent, Texas is going to, Texas is not going to have an off night. They're going to have to be prepared for a very good Wright State team.
Yeah, that would have to be a clash. But first, you got to get by Sanford, a team that also is used to being in the tournament. 3 straight SoCon titles, 4 of the last 5 years for head coach Kaylor Chan over there. And I think the one thing, and I want to finish it with this question here, there's a lot of depth. Don't get me wrong, right? Sam Wolf, who's only played a handful of sets, she has come on strong late. You've got Alders and Sauer and Ladd and Powers. And I mean, the names just keep on coming and keep on coming. What is the chink in the armor, right? What is the thing that Sanford might do? And if Wright State doesn't rebound or recover from it, it's going to be, one and done for this team.
Well, the one thing that I really liked, my favorite part of the match in the championship game this past weekend was when Wright State went down 2-1. Wright State went down 2-1, and UIC the previous weekend, in fact, their backs were definitely against the wall against a good NKU team in Northern Kentucky. UIC, they were down 2-0. They were down big in that third set as well, facing elimination. That's a very good UIC team. You're right. On a normal given year when there's more seeds up for grabs, it's probably a 2-bid league once again. So they took it to Wright State. Wright State was down 2-1. They were on the brink of being eliminated. And then all of a sudden, it's like you just watch this switch. They just flip this switch. Coaches don't like that. They don't want to have to rely on a switch to be flipped. They would just prefer that the power's always on, right? But I watched that switch be flipped, and it's like UIC went from this team that was taking it to Wright State. And at one point, I'm like, man, unless something changes, I don't see Wright State winning this match. But then the real Wright State team showed up, and it was like they just overwhelmed UIC. It wasn't like an even match the rest of the way. Wright State, when they flipped that switch, they overwhelmed UIC. So we learned a lot about Wright State when they get down, that they're not going to hang their head. They're not going to, just fold. That's going to be something a lesson that they learned. It's tough to learn a lot of lessons in an undefeated season, because sometimes how much adversity do you actually face? You're undefeated. You win every match. What lessons do you learn? It's an experienced group. They learned a lesson in that title game, and it's always good to learn a lesson while coming out on top, and that's what they did.
You got Matters, you've got Powers, all of the puns write themselves for you, Justin. Thank you so much. He's Justin Kinner, the voice of Wright State Volleyball, and that'll wrap up this sub-region. We've got one more to go, folks. One more sub-regional breakdown. Tomorrow, keep an eye out for Nebraska and the Baylor sub-region before all of the fun starts on Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Justin. We'll wrap it up.